everyone, and welcome to our first and probably last remote session of RMT 137, the computer lab portion. And today we're beginning with spreadsheets. Now, I should post a few warnings. I'm recording this in a sort of dark, windowless basement in Vancouver without any wireless or network connection. So hopefully this will work, and hopefully I'll be able to get it to you in Whitehorse in time for class, but we'll assume that's working and you're watching this in front of the big screen. These notes, by the way, these videos will be online on our website, perhaps not immediately, but you'll be able to review them and you can play them back at your own speed. I want to try and put them on YouTube, but I'm not sure how good the video quality will be, so stand by. But I'll also hand out, or at least give you links to the original video files which you'd be able to download to your computer and play using Windows Media Player, or if you've got another video player, or on Mac you can play them using QuickTime, I believe. So we'll start off. We've got a few topics today in spreadsheets, just an introduction. We're going to be using Microsoft Excel, which is the big name in spreadsheets, but all of the spreadsheets, all of the topics that we're going to cover apply to pretty much any spreadsheet you could find. We'll go through a quick history of how spreadsheets came about, not too much, no dates to memorize or anything like that, but there are other spreadsheets out there. Certainly there's online ones, like Google Docs has a spreadsheet, which can't do quite everything that we're going to do in all of our classes, but it can do a lot, and as we'll see when we get to online collaboration, it offers quite a few features for teamwork, especially simultaneous edits, people working together on a spreadsheet in real time from different places around the globe potentially. We'll also, another option is OpenOffice has a spreadsheet called Calc, if memory serves, which is actually loaded on the lab computers at the college. It's free, you can download it. There's two versions of OpenOffice. There's one called OpenOffice, which is more the standard one. There's also another sort of side project called LibreOffice, which is a little bit more free of the encumbrances of a large corporate controller. OpenOffice is now controlled by Oracle, which is a big database company. But those are some options, and there are other spreadsheets out there. Of course, we do have, you've probably, I announced it the other day, we can get the $10 version of Office 2010 through the college. I posted a link about that on the announcements on our website, so you can look through that. That's certainly probably our best option. For just $10 you can download that and install it on your computer, Mac or Windows, and it comes with Excel and Word and PowerPoint and even Outlook, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll start off with spreadsheet. Now, I don't have much to look at here on the screen right now, but before spreadsheets, let's just look back to, say, the 70s, the 60s, and back to Victorian England, where we had Bob Cratchit sitting at a tall desk and writing figures into a ledger, if you remember the story of Christmas Carol with Scrooge. What they had then was general ledgers, which is just a piece of paper with some lines on it, some grid lines on it, to keep track of your accounts. Expenses going out, income coming in, and keeping track of that. So it's very basic accounting. Gradually, somebody thought, especially when computers came around in the 70s, and we're talking about the big old mainframes that were provided by IBM and only lived in basements and only a select specialized few could ever look at, let alone touch. So long before the home computers, certain specific programs were written to do accounting for corporations, because a big company has to do a lot of accounting. Even an organization like the school with just a couple of hundred employees has to do an enormous amount of counting for payroll and for assets that they purchase, like the lab computers and buildings and all the rest of it. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of calculations. So IBM had, and other big large companies which have lost in the mists of time, had would produce single purpose accounting programs. That's all they did, was accounting for this one company. And if you were another company, you'd hire IBM at hundreds of thousands of dollars, who knows how much, to do your accounting. So it wasn't general purpose. It couldn't do anything else but accounting, just for your company sort of idea. And that's how this all came about. First ledger books, then these very special purpose, specific software written on old big mainframe computers just for a certain company or an organization that could afford such a thing. So that was the situation from when computers began, let's say 60s, late 60s, until 1978. The Apple II and the Apple II Plus, which was its more popular successor, came out during the mid-70s. And in 1978, a fellow named Dan Bricklin, who is just one of those great names in microcomputer software, invented this thing called VisiCalc. And it was the first spreadsheet. And he established a lot of the rules. Actually, it wasn't just Dan Bricklin, with some other people, but he established sort of the rules of that columns were named with letters and rows were named with numbers, and we have a general L shape of our column and row headings, and that we write formulas that we'll talk about shortly in a subsequent video in a certain way, and then you could automatically recalculate values. That was just such an important advancement in the idea of what a company could do with a computer, that it was called the first killer app. And a killer app in the computer world means a program, software that you can buy that was so important to you that you didn't care what kind of computer hardware, the Apple, the Windows, Microsoft, or Apple, or all the other companies that existed back in 1978. You didn't care what it cost. You just wanted that program. You get any hardware, any attachments, any hard drives that were separate, or whatever you needed to run a spreadsheet. People saw this and they were just stunned by how useful this would be for their company to do their accounting without having to do paper ledgers, which they probably had if they were a small company, or if they were a large company, these very expensive, cumbersome, special purpose systems from big companies like IBM. So this 1978 VisiCalc comes from. I've lost the picture. I will find a new picture once I have internet connection again, for us to look at. But it's not much to look at, so we'll skip ahead and we'll look at what followed VisiCalc. It was so popular, sold however many thousands, millions copies, no idea. It was so popular that, of course, its imitators were shortly behind and came along. The next main one would have been 1983, and that was a company called Lotus. Hang on, I'm just got to figure out my little screen recording software. There we go. Lotus 123, and some of you may have even heard of this one, but here's what it looked like. This is very much what VisiCalc looked like as well, except VisiCalc only had capital letters, because the Apple only had capital letters in those days, and was much smaller screen, so you couldn't see as much. But this came out in the IBM personal computer, the PC, the first iteration of what we now usually call Windows machines. Came out around in the early 1980s from IBM, and it was intended for business. And one of the first big programs was this spreadsheet called Lotus 123. The 1, the 2, the 3 stand for spreadsheet, database, which was minimal, and charting. And certainly in this course, we're going to use the spreadsheet and the charting. The database part is not as of great interest to us. So we'll be using the 1 and the 3 anyway of Lotus 123. Now this came out and Lotus famously stole all the ideas from VisiCalc, invented just a few years ago, and reaped untold millions, managed to patent and copyright and all the rest. Dan Bricklin, the fellow who invented VisiCalc, didn't come away with very much money, despite having been the creator of the first real spreadsheet as it exists today. So sad story there, but he's still well-respected, well-known name, and didn't seem to mind. One of those nice people who doesn't need all that much money. But Lotus came out with 123, and this was again a phenomenon. Everybody had Lotus 123, and this is what it looked like. Very simple. We'll see gradually it'll get more colorful, but the same ideas. We see we have columns that are numbered, A, B, C, D, E, F, and so forth. Rows that are numbered. I keep seeing this pop up. I'm not sure what that is, but and then we've got some people have typed in some labels, we'll call them, and here's some employees and figures and so forth. So we'll be able to do all of those sorts of things with our spreadsheet, but this is what it looked like back in the early 80s. And if we skip ahead, here is the first version of Excel. Now, it may surprise you to learn, but Excel, a Microsoft program, was written originally for the Macintosh. The Apple Macintosh came out in 1984. 1985, Microsoft releases the first version of Excel. It existed before Microsoft Word. And it was just for the Macintosh because there was no Windows back then. Microsoft computers were still running something called MS-DOS, just basic text, like what we saw on the previous screen. So finally now we have Windows, but the spreadsheets are the same sort of look to them. They've got the letters for the columns, the rows are numbered. This time we have a menu that's separate, but this is the early Macs. This is what spreadsheets looked at. Skipping ahead, here's the first Excel for Windows. This was an older version of Windows, which most of us have never seen. I never used this one. This is Windows version 3 was the big one that people got used to, that we saw more commonly. This was version 1 or 2. I'm not even sure which. But same idea, columns, rows, a spreadsheet. It's even got a little pop-up screen, but kind of ugly, basic looking, sort of what we've come to expect from old Microsoft products. But there was the version for Windows. So they finally did catch up, and then of course Microsoft still does produce Excel for Macintosh. They have a different date scheme. Right now the most current Microsoft Office is Office 2010 or Excel 2010. Office is a combination of all those programs: Word, Excel, Photoshop, PowerPoint, Outlook, and so forth. The current version of Office for the Mac is Office 2011. And again, $10. If you've got a Mac, you can download it from that college-sponsored site. So now we have the Windows. I'll skip ahead again. These pictures are going to be on our website, I hope. Here is a admittedly fuzzy screenshot, but this is what OpenOffice looks like maybe 10 years ago. It's advanced sense. It's still not pretty, but this is the free one, remember? So even if $10 is too much of a crunch, everything that we're going to do in class will work just fine on OpenOffice or its cousin, LibreOffice, and really, for me, they're indistinguishable. They both use the same code. It's just two different groups controlling them and modifying them. So at the moment, there's not much to tell apart, but you can Google and find and ask me questions via email or in person when I'm back. But same idea. All the stuff that we're going to do in class, including the charts, all works here. Maybe a little bit differently. Things are in different places, but the ideas, the concepts that we're going to cover, the important stuff, it's all the same. And finally, the version that we're going to use, again, fuzzy here, but we'll see a real version soon. But look at those fancy looking charts, which we'll get to in a few weeks. We'll spend a couple of lessons on charts because it's a pretty important topic, especially for those of you in renewable resources. When you want to present your data to someone else, you don't just want to give them a slab of numbers. You want to give them something visual that people can absorb quickly. That's what charts are. Some of you may call them graphs or something like that, but Excel calls them charts. So that's the current state of affairs. Microsoft Excel 2010 for Windows or 2011 for Mac. They're essentially the same program, just running on different operating systems. And in a minute, we'll just have a look at what the differences are between the old version of Microsoft Excel. Perhaps you use version 2003, but if you have version 2007 or version 2010, there's a new user interface. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I also want to make one more note. There's a video we're about to see. It's called What If I Used a Spreadsheet, and it talks about what if analysis. Now you'll find that this little video I produced for some class that I was taking in teaching, so a teaching class, and so it may not make all that much sense. It was my first attempt at doing a video, much like the screencast we're doing here. So watch it. Don't worry if you don't absorb all that's going on with the spreadsheets. One of them in particular is very complicated, but we'll see those spreadsheets, lo and behold, in upcoming classes. So we'll get another chance to look at them. But the idea is this is what spreadsheets gave us. Sure, we can put lists of stuff. You can keep track of, everybody who owes you money, let's say. Or, as an example, we'll see a student budget. Perhaps you want to prepare for the year to come, and you want to calculate what your budget is going to be. Will you have enough money to complete your studies? How much can you spend on Friday and Saturday nights for the next 8 months? So we'll use a spreadsheet like that. But what spreadsheets are great for is this thing called what if analysis. So no longer you have a piece of paper where if you say, okay, if I make $200 for a week for the next year, how much money will I have at the end? Well, you can calculate that, but then you always want to ask yourself, well, maybe I'll make a little bit more. What if I made 250 a week with, maybe you're doing something that you get tips at. Maybe if you wear a bigger smile, you get more tips at, or something like that. What if I made a little bit more? Spreadsheets can do that, give you that calculation immediately. You can play little guessing games and it will answer you immediately. You don't have to wait. You don't have to write it all out by hand or use a hand calculator or anything like that. So we'll watch a little video called What If I Had a Spreadsheet. It's got a soundtrack and everything. It's a full production. And then when we come back, we'll continue on looking at spreadsheets, and we can all follow along because we'll open up a spreadsheet available on our website called Student Budget. But let's watch the video first, and then when you come back to our next video here, you'll have your spreadsheet ready to go.